Γεια χαρά φίλοι και φίλες του Game Over GR. Γιώργος Καλήφας στο μικρόφωνο, σε έναν μικρό πρόλογο για αυτό το βίντεο που θα παρακολουθήσετε ευθύς αμέσως. Όπως είναι γνωστό, Μεγάλη Τετάρτη και Μεγάλη Πέμπτη το Game Over GR ήταν στην Νορβηγία σε ένα event που διοργάνωσε η Sony για διάφορα μέσα παγκοσμίως, τα μεγαλύτερα μέσα παγκοσμίως για το launch του God of War. Μέσα από αυτό το event έχουμε ήδη ανεβάσει αρκετό υλικό και στο Facebook page μας και στο κανάλι μας, αλλά ειδικά αυτό το βίντεο, το οποίο περιλαμβάνει περίπου 30 λεπτά ενός Q&A του Cory Barlog, του director του God of War, και μία σύντομη συνέντευξη που μας έδωσε προσωπικά. Θα παρακολουθήσετε αμέσως μόλις τελειώσουν αυτά τα πλανάκια που βλέπετε τώρα. 30 λεπτά λοιπόν Q&A με πάρα πολύ υλικό, ενδιαφέρον υλικό από τον Barlog, και ένα περίπου 5 λεπτό συνέντευξη στο Game Over GR από τον director του God of War και τον ηθοποιό που υποδίδεται τον Kratos. Σας αφήνουμε να δείτε.
And we work a lot, so I get sick all the time. And we were shooting one day, and I was very down with a cold. And this man is, he's kind of into being healthy, works out a lot. And he said, hey, you should take a shot of apple cider vinegar. That'll totally make you feel better. Yeah, that's right. I should have thought of that in advance. So he said, no, we'll do this. And I think we actually got footage of this, right? And that's the only reason I didn't get sick is because it was on camera. And I was like, I'm not throwing up my camera. So I was like, all right, fine, let's do this. He goes out to his car, and it was 80 or 90 degrees outside in Los Angeles, and he had his apple cider vinegar in his trunk. So it was
cooking, basically.
It was like evil hot sake, basically. And he brought it in, and it was raw apple cider vinegar, right? Which apparently raw apple cider vinegar is far more potent than any other regular apple cider vinegar. So you get a little shot like this, and we sat at a table and took a shot of that, and that was the most disgusting thing I've ever had in my entire life. It was. It is indescribable, and he was smiling the whole time he did his shot. He does that shit every morning. That's no big deal for him. So, and it did make me feel better. I felt energized for the rest of the day. So, if ever you have to shoot something for a day and survive, then apple cider vinegar. And don't blame me if you get sick.
I mean, you totally sold it. I'm sure everyone thinks it tastes fantastic. They can't wait.
Really good.
You'll all be thrilled to know there's apple cider vinegar waiting for you when we get to the dock.
Right. That's true. It's a Viking thing. Yeah, it's gonna get you in the mood.
Throw axes, yeah.
Yeah, our first day that he talked about on the set, I was very brazen about this whole single camera shot thing. I was like, yeah, whatever, we're gonna do this, because I've been thinking about it for a long time. So I wanted so badly for this to work that I think I blocked out all the actual difficult parts of it of my head. So the first day on the set, we had prepped our first shot, and our first shot was 4.5 minutes long. And I had a 9-year-old actor and then 3 other actors on a set that had 2 elevation changes. And in mocap, that's actually kind of a big deal because you have to build the set and line all the props up so that, they actually touch the CG object. So it was very, very complicated. And I think called action for the first take, right? Kind of talked to everybody about it, and I'm like, yeah, this is going to be totally great. And 2 minutes into the 4.5 minute take, I think it starts setting in that I'm like, oh man, what the hell did I do? And then I get all the way done, I call cut, and then just sit there for 2 minutes going I have 40 notes for everybody. I need to run it. I'm like, how are we going to do this? So finally I just grabbed 2 other people on the set, kind of gave them notes. They ran around and talked to the individual actors, and went over to Sonny and started giving him notes, and I could see on the second note his eyes glaze over. I was like, you're not paying attention to anything I'm saying. He's like, what? I'm like, oh, come on, dude. So yeah, it was at that time that I realized this is why nobody has done this, because it's crazy. But the testament to the actual actors we have, you guys actually made it very easy. You made me totally look like I knew what I was doing, which is fantastic. And I think if we ever do this again, I need you guys to do it again, right? Because I think if I had anybody else on there, I would have looked bad. So.
Chris is something I'm never doing this again.
Right. He's like, I'm locking you in front of all these people.
I have to say, I as an actor was completely unaware in the beginning of how much pressure this man was under. He never was one of these crazy dudes who lets all the pressure show and takes it out on everyone on set. So I didn't even realize kind of the immense pressure you were under until probably almost 2 years into it, when you know, people were coming by to see how things were going and stuff like that. But
Presidents of Sony popping in.
Yeah.
Like, are we done yet?
And that was one of the great things. Maybe some of you know where I've come from in my career, but I've always put
You
a
did
big,
Star Wars, right?
Throughout my career, I've always put a great deal on what the set environment is like, and this set environment truly was it. We laughed every single day, and to then have an understanding that you were still able to laugh and make sure everyone had a good time and was comfortable and took time explaining things, no matter how many of us had that look on our faces, and you never let it get to you. I mean, that's really a true testament
Thank
to
you, sir.
to you, and it was a joy coming to work every day.
Aww.
That's so wonderful, truly.
This is the nicest I've seen you two beat each other since we started working on
Well,
this.
that's because there's other people around.
Right.
We're nice in front of the cameras.
That's all that matters. You just mentioned the single camera shot and how difficult it is. Just in case people don't really understand what you're sort of talking about with that, tell us a little bit about that and what it brings to the game.
Okay, so I actually had worked with a couple of directors on my time away from Sony, and was learning a bit from them, and kind of had come to realize that the language of film is something that in games we sort of just adopted, right? That we sort of just took it on because we're all huge fans of great television, great movies, and kind of the way that we invite the sort of audience in is kind of changing lenses, changing position, changing composition. So close-up shots, two shots, medium shots, crane shots. All of these things are speaking on a sort of another layer to the audience. But I realized, like in games, we have this sense of immediacy that is present way more than I think in film, right? And there are films that have done the single shot, which creates this great sense of consistent tension. But in video games, you have a lot more control over that. So part of me wanted to do this because I saw a lot of film directors starting to get an eye in games, and I was like, there's no way one of them is going to come in here and do this. And I was like, we have to be the ones to innovate on this. But the idea of telling the story with Kratos and making it a bit more personal, I was like, okay, this is the perfect marriage, because I tried to pitch this thing to several studios over the years, and everybody kind of just said, why would we do that? That sounds stupid. That sounds like a lot of work. I don't understand the payoff. And in the beginning of this one, I think it's the same thing. Everybody said, I don't get this. This is going to be really hard. Why would we do this? Thankfully, a lot of people on the team who now have time to play the game have played through and said, oh, I realize, I get it now. I get why we did this. There is a sense of urgency and immediacy to everything. So as you are playing this, you kind of feel very connected to the character, and everything feels like it's taking place in the moment. Which I think in video games we don't have to do. There's no like fast forward in time in this game. There's no like, hey, we fell asleep, we wake up, and it's like 10 days later. Everything is happening on the road, right? You are experiencing this whole journey as it unfolds with them, but it also offers this fantastic sense that what you take into the experience is all the sort of previous experiences to this. You don't get to know that, oh, these characters were plotting against you in a cutaway shot. You don't get any sort of past history flashback or anything like that. You have to take every character's interaction on face value and kind of gauge what they're sort of trying to say to you. And I think there was a big part of how we wanted these characters to not only relate to each other, Kratos and Atreus, but how the world would relate to them and help their sort of journey unfold. So it was a very, very big challenge, but I think at the end, when you put it all together, it's really the only way that you can appreciate it. I think even in the early portion when we did one test for it, people were like, yeah, I still don't get it, right? But after about 15 hours, you're like, oh wow, this is crazy, right? You feel tense all the time, which is a good thing, right? An excellent sense of tension. So I hope to do it again. No, I really don't. It's a lot of work.
But you were the first, and that's what's most important.
There you go. I don't know though. Maybe there's other games that have done it. I think we're the only ones that have fully done it throughout the whole
Yeah.
game, right? So there's zero compromise of nothing. So the camera always moves wherever it needs to go.
And Chris, what was it like for you working with Sunny? Because obviously you have come out and said before there's a personal impact to this game, the idea of fatherhood and you bringing that into it. So it's not just about Kratos and Atreus, but you and Sunny must have had to have built a relationship to be able to portray that in the game.
Oh, I hated that little fucker.
There's the hot take we've all been waiting for.
No, it was.
Sonny
It's
had the
it was.
final say in your hiring.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't find this out till later,
I didn't know that.
but so I'd gone in a couple times for readings and was moving on, and so was called for a chemistry test. So chemistry test for a game. Wow, that's interesting. And it was even more off-putting when it was with a 10-year-old. But having been a father and having, it was weird. It was, I want to jump around a little bit. This game was really, this process was cathartic to me. Having sons who are now in their 20s, you feel guilty. I felt guilty about a lot of their younger years when I was working all the time, so I missed huge chunks of really important times in their lives. And to kind of go back and not only in what was written, but also in the interpersonal relationship with Sonny, to get to reinvestigate and re-explore a lot of the times that I missed with my own son, really made the relationship to Sonny really important to me, really special to me, and we really got along really well. And that the kid he's just a brilliant. I almost hesitate to use kid. He's like this little savant. But yeah, it was part of the great. And the thing is, he doesn't let you get away with anything. He gives it as just as much as he gets. He's so quick-witted and so on the ball. That coupled with the attention span of a 10-year-old was oftentimes quite amusing. But yeah, hopefully you will see the very real relationship that we had as two human beings also that will come through.
That's amazing. Now, as people who enjoy video games, there's normally a few things that we dread, right? Time jumping puzzles, being underwater without being able to breathe, but particularly escort missions tend to be a thing that gamers aren't always massively sold on. Now, when you were developing God of War and wanting to introduce Atreus, this must have been something you thought about, of how you introduce something that on the surface might look like an escort mission, and that's not really what people want.
I mean, I wanted the subtitle to be "It's an escort mission." God of War.
The escort
Seriously, it's
mission.
an escort mission, right? That was a big thing in the beginning. That every time I talked about, hey, Chris is going to have a son, he's going to be part of the entire experience. And he's not just going to tag along and deliver a narrative. He's actually going to be part of the entire experience, right? This is the period piece in which his father is preparing him for the realities of the world. But this is Kratos' version of the reality of the world, right? So it's pretty fucked up. It is a very warped sense of what the world is, because obviously he's had terrible familial experiences, right? His dad was, spoilers, by the way, his dad was Zeus. And Zeus was not a very good dad, right? Because his dad, Kronos, tried to eat him, right? So then they had to kill their dad. So Kratos has had a fairly traumatic upbringing, right? And I still steal your quote all the time, right? Because it's literally the best way to say this, but it's like, the sort of premise that I didn't realize until he said it in an interview was this idea that, how can you be a father when you've never been fathered yourself, right? I thought, oh, that's really good. I wish I came up with that. And for all intents and purposes, I did. I totally came up with that. But, the idea of introducing Atreus into the gameplay loop was important to make it that when you play the game, you don't ever need to worry about him from a gameplay sense, right? In that sense of like, oh, the AI is going to run out and jump into a fight, and what a stupid game. We wanted to really kind of, one, put you in a situation where, as a parent, you don't really get to take over your child and go to school for them, right? You kind of have to just sort of teach them and hope they do the best. But still allowing them to be competent enough to feel like, all right, you're never going to get in a situation where the game ends because you didn't protect Atreus, right? There are moments throughout the sort of dramatic arc in which he acts like a kid, and you sort of have to deal with that. But you know, I think right from the start, we had met with some people over at Naughty Dog, right? They were the closest developer to us who had actually handled a companion. So we went over to, actually this was incited by the programmers who said, let's go over. They had a different motive for doing this. They wanted to go over and talk to the AI programmer, and they're like, you know, we'll take a look at what it was about. Underneath all of that, they were saying, haha, he's going to find out how hard it is, and he's not going to want to do it, right? So they were like, oh, cool, and they said, you know, tell him the worst, right? And they did. They said, like, you know, we worked on, we over-designed Ellie for a long time, and then, you know, in the last 6 months, threw everything out and started over. And what I took away from that was, guys, they did it in 6 months. This is great. We can easily do this. And they were like, that is not the lesson you need to walk away from that with. But the sort of main takeaways we had was this idea of coming up with a core set of rules for the character to ensure that the player's experience is always sort of favored. This idea of the character never getting in your way, never being annoying, never stealing your kills, that kind of thing. And I think just attacking the very complicated problem with a simple set of rules really helped. Sort of the onus of writing this entire story was this idea of having a simple story, but very complex characters. You know, characters that actually develop over a period of time that you get to know, that are flawed, that have good points and bad points, but you're never really overwhelmed by this kind of history lesson or this feeling of a very complicated plot. And I think that same thing sort of bled out into all of our systems as well, to ensure that every time we approached any problem, we tried to get that core set of rules of what is the purpose of this and how can we simplify it to make it fun. And then let's take all the fun out and then let's just torture the hell out of players.
Now, talking of fun, God of War's always kind of been known for its combat, and the combat has been, it's really enjoyable just to run into enemies and cause some horrific damage. Now, I do think that even though we've got some remasters on PS4, there will be a lot of people experiencing God of War for the first time on PlayStation 4. Now, when you were developing things like combat, was there anything you're like, we have to keep this? We have to keep this, this is what the core of God of War is, or was it really like, old rule book just went out the window, it's like, blank slate?
At the beginning, we did kind of try to write every aspect of the game up on a board. So we basically just sat in a room with like 12 other people and just started calling out things, you know, from double jump to the, you know, the cinematic cameras, to Kratos being small, to environmental puzzles, literally every possible thing we could imagine. Filled up several whiteboards full of that, and then one by one, went through each of these kind of pointing and kind of doing the sort of like, let's defend this. Why is this important? Is this sort of a load-bearing wall to the franchise? And if it is there any way we can flip it on its head and make it feel fresh, right? So the new camera kind of dictated a lot of decisions. And when we decided that the camera was going to be in close and user-controlled, it changed the way we attacked a lot of other problems. And then kind of decided certain things we didn't want to take on in the first game, right? Like the idea of the jump. Some people are very upset about not having to jump. But trust me, when you play it, you really don't miss it. You do jump in the game, we just don't have that sort of Counter-Strike obsessive jumping over and over and over and over again. Because that's what I did all the time, and it annoyed people to no end when we reviewed the game. Because I'd just be jumping around all the time, and they'd be like, can you please stop jumping? On this game, my new jump is the axe throwing. So at the beginning of the project, we'd be in reviews for levels, and I would just be looking up and throwing the axe and trying to hit stuff, and mostly I was just pointing out there's no collision on that tree. There's no collision on that wall, and it just, everyone was so
your team must
frustrated.
love you.
They
must
love me
love you.
so much. No, that was quite an annoying period of time for them. But the sort of aspects of combat that we, again with the simple rules, this pick up and play concept, right? So that at its heart, the sort of throwing and returning of the axe kind of came from one of the comment designers and a programmer who said, we have this idea, we're going to work some test out, so let's play it. And they had initially placed throwing the axe on one button and then pressing another button to call it back. And I loved that. I was super in love with that. And immediately I think they were like, no, we got to change it. I think it's because I liked it. And I realized about halfway through the project, I have to dislike something and make them fight for it. Otherwise, they're going to be like, he likes it. There must be something wrong with it. Which is,
Reverse psychology.
I know, right? Right? It's working with children. And not the team is not children. They are wonderful, wonderful human beings that made this a beautiful game. But yeah, they fought, I think, for about a year to remove it back off of that button, right? But I was like, no, this is very important. This idea of having creativity, right? And in previous God of War games, we kind of had the dial-a combo, right? You had a pre-established set of combinations that you just had to sort of memorize, if you will, and then as you went through the game, we would give you new moves, but they would be very specific, and everything would kind of happen on a linear curve because I'm extremely controlling. I want everybody to have the exact same experience that I've dictated to them. And now I've realized, like, that's a terrible way to play, right? You want to express yourself throughout the combat, and that button, to recall, added a tremendous amount of creativity in the game, because what it meant was, as you throw the axe out, you're now in control of when you want to bring that back. And that means that you can reposition yourself in the arena, you can start fighting with your bare hands and your shield, and then recall the axe through a couple of enemies and kind of trick them on the way back, right? And that's just one example of what you can do with it to kind of feel as if there is far more non-deterministic combat, right? This idea of, I can go into the same fight and 5 of us can have very different experiences. You can go in the same fight again and have a completely different experience. So that was something that was very new, but at its core, this idea of the player kind of having that sort of just unabashed fun, right? This is just jump in and kind of have fun immediately. There is a lot more going on in this game, so it takes a little bit longer to kind of adjust to it. But another thing I want to say, the reason that I think I've said this before, but it is a good thing to note, is that this is the best game to get into if you've never played God of War, right? That's why I named it God of War and not God of War 4, right? Mostly because I am TV obsessed, and I would never start a series on like episode 183, right? I would watch 182 episodes to get up to that point, and I didn't want anybody to feel like, oh, I have to go back and play. It's more like, no, this is a great way to get into it. If you like this, you should check out the older games. That's pretty good.
Now, we're not coining this God of War as open world, but are you guys doing anything? I mean, this is what I've got written.
Okay, good. I didn't read your notes, so we are not.
We are not coining it as open world. But what are you guys doing, though, to make it feel living and breathing? Or is it very much that narrative-driven, single story experience?
This one of the main pillars that I wanted for this game was this concept of discovery and exploration. Some of my favorite moments in gaming are this sense that when I find something, I feel like I was the one that found it, and I'm obviously not stupid. I totally realize that everybody else also found this, but I have that moment, right? The beginning of Shadow of the Colossus, right? The first Colossus you find that you're kind of like, no one else found this. This is great, and this celebration of discovery, this idea that curiosity in a video game is rewarded, right? Was a big part of this game, right? A lot of open world games to me kind of feel like you start the thing, and then you have this giant map with a bunch of icons and a whole lot of homework, and I feel overwhelmed. So I didn't really want to kind of do that, but I like the idea that you sort of be dropped in this world, and as you go through the world opens up more and more, and we never sort of force you to do anything. It's more like your curiosity of, what's that over there? And then when you go over there, you might find something small. You might find an entire level that we just said, hey, if you go over there and find it, that's great, but you're not required to do it. So for me, the concept of really rewarding people for being curious and discovering things was sort of the cornerstone of all the exploration in this game. Because exploration has been part of the previous God of War games, but it's always been a little small path. You find a chest here or there, but now, much to this dismay of the team sometimes, because they create, a level that took them a year, and I'd be like, great, and now only 20% of the players are probably going to find this, which is just like sadness, right? And then they would fight, no, let's make it go over here. But I think it's much better to feel like, the agency is really in you, the player, right? We're not making movies. It's all up to the player and what they want to experience.
What about after the story is done? Can we revisit that world and explore to find things we've missed? Or is it, story's done and it's just, thank you very much for playing? We'll do
Thank you
it
very
again.
much for playing.
Thank you
I
very
come
much
on
for
and I say thank you very much for playing. We don't have really the traditional new game plus, right? The sort of continuation of the game is inspired for me by Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Anybody play that?
Yeah.
Raise your hands. Come on, let's contribute on this one.
You can be
Fantastic.
honest, it's
Good.
okay.
That's great. Castlevania Symphony of the Night. For those of you who haven't played it, spoilers, has a fantastic moment in which you think the game's over, but then the entire game literally flips upside down, and then you re-experience it from a completely different perspective. If you haven't played, you should go play one of the best Castlevania games ever made. But this same concept of when you reach the end of the story, right? You finish the journey, and you are sort of ushered out back into the world to say it's not done, right? And at this point, there's lots of stuff to do. You can revisit almost every place. I think there's a very tiny percentage of places that are not revisitable for obvious reasons that you'll find out when you play. But otherwise, yeah, we sort of encourage to continue going back into the world. Lots of things to do in there, and everything kind of has the same attention and care that the core story does. So it never really feels like a side mission where you're just going to get chickens or something like that. It's very much all focused on the development of the world, the characters, and really kind of bringing you into this wonderful mythology that there is no possible way in the core story we could ever tell everything, because the mythology is so dense and so varied.
What about, because I'm a particular fan of these, what about photo mode? 'Cause I know there's been some talk online, so let's just put it out there. Will there be a photo mode?
There will totally be a photo mode. I've been cagey about the photo mode simply because this is an extremely difficult game for us to finish. We always have felt a little like Indiana Jones, a little over our head at all times, right? To me, it's the best part about Indiana Jones. I feel like every time he gets in a fight, he's always a little bit in over his head, and he comes out victorious. I feel like that was the development of this game. Was we were always, we needed an extra year at all times. Even now, I wish I had an extra year.
No, we
It
need
would
a
probably
game.
kill me, I think. Actually, if we had an extra year, I would most likely die. But the photo mode was sort of the last thing that we knew we were going to do this, and we know we want to put something cool in there. So we are still kind of putting the finishing touches on all of photo mode, but it will be very cool.
Okay. And so very finally, before we talk about what you guys are actually going to play today, PlayStation 4 Pro and performance mode. Because the game already looks great, but what is the PlayStation 4 Pro going to be able to squeeze out of it?
So this was a later addition. We had this mode, I think like 6 or 8 months ago, which would basically just force the game to run at 1080 so that it would favor all the extra processing power to make it run faster, right? And I love that mode. For me, I like the sort of responsiveness and everything. But we have basically 2 modes: favor graphics, favor performance, right? Favor graphics will be the obvious if you have a 4K TV. Seriously, it is amazing, right? 4K HDR. It is absolutely amazing, the level of detail that the artists were able to get into this world, and it plays wonderfully as well, so that is fantastic. And then favorite performance, we'll run it at 1080 and then put all the extra power into making it run as fast as it possibly can. This is sort of the kind of main thing onus behind this was that feeling of action games just feeling fantastic when they run as fast as they possibly can. So it will be good.
So we do want to very quickly, before we wrap up, talk about what you guys are playing. Tell us a little bit about the gameplay. How many hours roughly, and where it's set in the game?
So you guys have 27 hours to play.
And then it
Just
explodes.
kidding. Yeah, I was like, oh my god, we're never getting off this boat.
This is it. You live on this boat
Right,
now.
we're just gonna go in circles. So we're playing the first about 2 to 2.5 hours, depending on what you sort of explore of the game. So this is the introduction to everything, and even at the end of this 2.5 hours, you've still got a bunch of other new stuff you're gonna learn after this. So it is very much kind of the ushering you into the world. So it's not like it hasn't reached its peak difficulty. You haven't gotten all the systems. You're kind of learning this, getting to know the characters, starting to venture out into the world. You have the first sort of interaction with the larger, or sort of boss fight, I guess, if you will, at the beginning. I will say we have several difficulty modes in the game. It may seem like you'll want to play Give Me God of War, because we called it Give Me God of War, but I would highly suggest not playing at that. That's the hardest difficulty mode. Normally we would put that like you play through the game and then we'd unlock that, but I was like, screw that, man. Let's open it right away. It is very difficult. The combat designers got together and retuned so much and did a lot of stuff to make Gimme God of War very difficult. And it is fantastic, and I have not made it through Gimme God of War yet. I'm still about halfway through the game, cursing at the screen every time I play because it is really hard. But it has a special aspect that if you choose this mode, you cannot downgrade to an easier mode. So you'll have a save file for it, but you cannot go down to easier. You'll have to start over from the beginning. So that's why I would suggest, playing on Give Me a Balanced Experience or Give Me a Story. Like if you just want to experience a story, that one is for just getting in there, having fun. Give Me a Balanced Experience will increase the challenge. Give Me a Challenge is definitely more of a challenge. I have almost beat that one. Farther along in Give Me a Challenge than I am in Give Me God of War.
There's no shame on playing it on easy, alright, everybody? We're not going to judge you if you play it on
No,
easy.
it's not easy. It's Give Me a Story. We found that, like, psychologically, nobody wants to select easy mode. I'm the same way. But when we were playtesting it, we called it easy mode, and everybody was, not selecting. We're like, well, would you do this at home? Well, yeah. I'm like, well, why didn't you select it here? Because there are other people around. Like, you're watching us. I was like, oh, that's interesting.
Yay, peer pressure.
So I was like, all right. And then we called it Give Me a Story, and everybody's like, cool, I like stories. So, Psychology 101, fantastic.
Guys, thank you very much. Now, we would normally take some questions from you guys, but I know most of you have got Q&As later, and I have been told to wrap it up. I've had the...
I'm going to ask you a question that probably have heard many times. Why did you decide to make such a drastic change in the look and feel of the overall game?
I think, when I came back to Sony, I noticed, when I looked around, everybody I had worked with, many of them had worked on the original God of War. We're all so much older, right? Like, we have been through so many things in our lives, right? But we had all come together in 2003, back in the beginning, and sort of, like our college years, fought to make this amazing game. And kind of looking at what we play now, looking at how we view the world, I realized, like, all right, if we're going to do this, if we're really going to jump in and make another God of War, we're not just going to make another God of War, right? Like, I think just doing another one, we did that, and it was received very well by some of the fans, but it still felt like we didn't push ourselves hard enough, right? We didn't push ourselves far enough. And, it definitely made me realize, like, I think we can do something that far transcends our own expectations of it.
You said concerning the games that you're playing now, can you be more specific about those games? Do you have any kind of inspiration from any modern games?
I mean,
or ideas?
Yeah, I mean, all the different sections of the team had different games that are sort of meaningful to them. The one that I always go back to, the one that has affected me the most, and it not as from the, oh, well, this is just the same game we're going to make. It's more of the boldness of the teams, right? Resident Evil has reinvented itself multiple times. Mm-hmm. Resident Evil 3 to Resident Evil 4. Resident Evil 4 considered this high watermark for truly what a franchise can become. And it made such dramatic changes, right? Changes that even the director of Resident Evil had said, you can't do that, right? And then he ended up doing it, right? He said, oh, you can't have a controllable camera in a horror game. It'll never work. And then he did it. I think he said it just so that he could succeed at it and say, I did it. But for me, that game represented this idea of you can look slightly differently at something that you're very familiar with. And I think I use that as my sort of focal point, not to say, I'm going to just mimic what they're doing, because nothing what we did at all mimics that, but it's the spirit, right? And then even with recent Resident Evil 7, like they are brave enough to continue to look at what they're doing and say, how can we make this better?
Okay. Yes, I'd like to continue on this, and it's actually a question that has to do with both of you. What are your thoughts on the future of single-player games, and more precisely on games that have a narrative that give the player something to focus on, not just killing another player? And what are the challenges for you as an actor and for you as a creator?
I said this earlier. I think that with God of War, we're really at the genesis of a new stage in gaming, whereas before, you know, just random killing was the motivation. But now, I think it has to be story, it has to be relationships, it has to be character arcs, it has to be emotion, it has to be relatable. And I think that's what's going to carry forward the next wave of games, like not the accessibility of the experience, the relatability of the experience, and that all starts with story, you know, and relatable characters and universal themes, and I think that's what the next stage of it has to be in order for it to continue.
Yeah, I mean, I feel single-player gaming and sort of linear narratives, but linear narratives in a very positive way. Like great stories, you know, generally are all reaching a sort of linear conclusion. But I think there is always a place for that. We always want to be taken on a journey, right? That while we have many games, I think, that provide phenomenal sort of mechanical experiences, that provide sort of cooperative camaraderie, all these sort of experiences that we can have, there's always going to be a place for being told an amazing story, for suspending your disbelief and believing that this world is real. And I think I will always want to do that. I think that's the engaging thing for me, is actually creating these characters, creating these worlds. And I think there might be less now, simply because I think everybody's making sort of bigger bets. Everybody's really putting a lot in there. I feel like we're actually at one of the best times in single-player gaming, in the history of single-player gaming, because we have so many incredibly talented people making so many good games, to the point where I never have time to play all these things, but there are so many on my list that I want to get through. So I am fortunate, I think, that we are existing in a time in which we have the desire to want to tell great stories, and the audience has a desire to want to be told great stories.
Yeah, that's very interesting, because we didn't have the time to see more of the story while playing. How do you connect, this would probably be a spoiler, but how do you connect the journey of Kratos from ancient Greece to the north?
I approach this a little bit in the way that there's an episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, right, that has an introduction of a character where instead of building up the introduction of the character, they kind of just start as if everybody knows who the character is and they just go, right? It's the sort of writing concept of beginning a scene late, right? You arrive at the scene late so you don't have all that set up. For me, I wanted to feel like we have moved on to this new mythological era, and he is at a different place in his life. And what you find out about how he got there is through the journey and how much he's willing to share with his son. So I know a lot of people are hoping that we tell the exact story between there, but that is such a fertile ground for storytelling that, to me, I want to reference it, but I actually have lots of other ways that we want to tell those stories and connect all the way through. So it is definitely more to come with that.
Okay, thank you. One final question. Was this your first as an actor creating a character in a video game? And what was your overall experience of that?
Well, I had done other video games, but this is the first time that I actually had a chance to actually portray the evolution of a character. I can't say create a character, but portray the evolution of a character. And my overall experience, it was fantastic. It's I'm prouder of this work than